The following episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor is adapted from Pudding Faire by Will Doyle, Sean Merwin, and Cindy Moore. At the suggestion of one of the halfling residents of Wayward, our heroes opt to take the long road through Wayward and Buttergroves to meet the Moonsea Ride, rather than pick through the forest of Cormanthor for a detour to a quaint halfling town. Our four heroes, the halfling Jynx, the elves Túrendil and Rilyanasse, and the dwarf Massul, find themselves in the village of Honeypuddle on the eve of the annual Pudding Faire. They decide to take a day off and enjoy the halfling festival, securing lodging at the Squirrel and Nightjar Inn. The village of Honeypuddle, nestled in a narrow swath of woodland north of the Darkwood near the Moonsea, is home to nearly 100 halfling families. The surrounding woods are home to reclusive and strange forest gnomes and contain many pathways to the First World. Each year, the halflings invite their gnomish neighbors to join in celebration, games, and feasting, and so begins the Pudding Faire. The crow of a rooster awakens the sleepers from their slumber, followed by the sound of a brass band cranking up.
Roll up for the Pudding Faire!
Cries a voice from the street below. Peering out of the inn's window, they see a crowd of happy halflings and gnomes bustling toward a fairground on the village green. It is 7 o'clock in the morning, on the day of the annual Honeypuddle Pudding Faire. The party strolls down the way to enter the fair, seeing the event is already festive and lively. Giggling children startle a goose, causing it to flutter into a nearby gnome and drop her tray of cakes. "Oh dear!" she exclaims. A passing jackdaw relieves itself on the bald pate of an aged halfling. He shakes his fist at the avian. A nagging gnome approaches Massul. "Would you like to buy some apples?" he croaks. Massul purchases one for himself and one for Jynx at a copper apiece. And lastly, a barking dog chases a rat through the crowd, causing the town crier they had heard previously to fall face first in the mud, to the raucous laughter of the crowd. The entrance to the fair is flanked on the right by the wagon of the village herbalist, carved with cheerful images of woodland animals, which bears a sign reading, "Free gift for a good trick." To the left, an ancient halfling woman sits near a chariot with several large cats and a sign declaring, "Nanny Cowslip's Candies." Sherbet lemons, toffees, and peppermint bonbons are set out near a jar of glowing jelly beans that bears the label Magic Candies. Massul, upon sizing up the events, decides to make his way to the wrestling arena, hoping to test his strength or at least take in a good show, while the elves head for the cider stand and Jynx peruses a nearby yard sale. At the wrestling ring, the barker, one Ringo Brackenbaum, pulls an apple crate to the middle of the ring. Climbing upon it, he begins his barking, "Ladies and gentlemen!" but gets no further as a rotten plank in the crate snaps and he falls, his leg twisting in a way no limb should as it catches the hole. The crowd gasps. Halfway across the fair, the keen ears of the elves hear the commotion even above the noise of the crowd, and the two rise from their ciders to investigate. Pushing through the crowd, the two of them go about setting Ringo's leg, Rilyanasse apologizing for having to inflict the pain involved, before Túrendil calls upon the blessings of Corellin and heals the wound. Brackenbaum is carried off to a nearby tent to recover, the wrestling competition cancelled for the day. As the elves return to their ciders, the dwarf joins them, purchasing a cider for himself while he waits to enter the Oiled Boar Contest, a traditional gnomish game wherein a young wild boar is covered in grease and participants compete to be the first to seize the animal and hold it for 6 seconds. Entry is a gold piece, with a purse going to the winner. During the wait, Túrendil appraises a nearby sullen halfling, inquiring after his problems. Cooper Wellington Sparrow is the young lad's name, and he finds himself in his cups over Maisie Tucker's rejection of his invitation to tonight's dance. A soot-covered gnome briefly interrupts their conversation, orders a cider, blithely insults the bartender, and leaves. The aforementioned Maisie flounces by and runs into the Marquee while Wellington Sparrow laments his fortune. Jynx pursues the rude gnome, but he is, mysteriously, nowhere to be found, as Massul makes his way to the pig pen, stripping his armor and preparing to pursue Oinkers the piglet. A comedy of errors ensues as the dwarf fails to capture the pig, tangling himself in his own clothing and falling into the mud to the sound of the pig squealing noisily as it darts between his legs. Children laugh and the crowd jeers while the dwarf struggles to pin down the greasy piglet unsuccessfully. Massul finds his way to a nearby pond to wash the mud and humiliation away before returning to find himself another mug of cider. Túrendil suggests to Rilyanasse that they investigate the Marquee tent and prepare to enter. Before they can, shrieks of dismay and horror echo from the pig wrestling ring as a giant eagle swoops down from the sky and carries little oinkers off to a grisly fate. Túrendil assesses that they can give no aid to the pig in this situation, while Rill laments the plucky piglet.
Unfortunate. That little fellow was too plucky for such an end.
The guffawing of the dirty gnome prospector can be heard mixed in the crowd. In the marquee, a great pudding, a fruitcake 10 feet across, sits in the middle waiting on the night to fall that it may be sliced up and shared among all who came to Honeypuddle. The plump mayor greets the townsfolk who enter by name, and they answer, "Hello, Mayor Barleydew!" Halflings jump from table to table in a game of Yondala's luck, crossing the entirety of the marquee while those in attendance hurl food at the leaper. A stray flying pie tags Rilyanasse, who finds the entire affair humorous. The pair decline to participate in Yondala's luck, leaving the marquee after some time. Interested in lunch and a touch of competition, Massul makes his way to the eel-eating competition. Eating the eels, a local variety considered a delicacy by the forest gnomes, represents the banishment of Erdlin, the gnome deity of greed and murder. A competitor has a set amount of time to swallow down 3 eels and win a prize. The dwarf participates, managing to down 2 squirming eels, unable to grab a third in the allotted time limit. Hungry for more, he scarfs down 3 of the forest eels, keeping himself from retching the squirming beast by sheer force of will and claiming the prize. Fortune smiles upon the fairgoer as he is witness to a portly halfling turning purple as he chokes on an eel. Massul makes his best go at dislodging the stuck fish and perhaps even saving Porter Sportfort. Jynx, having spent this time exploring the perimeter of the fair looking for the rude gnome from the cider stand, decides to play a game of Fool the Psychic. Petunia Peppergrass answers questions about the participant while they preemptively write the answer onto his stone slate. Jynx writes down her age and the psychic handily guesses it. Then her name, where she hails from, and so on. Jynx finds themselves stuck in a touch of introspective as Petunia asks, "What was your mother's hair color?" The psychic, seeing this, tries to comfort the halfling, refunding her silver and closing the attraction for the rest of the hour as she sits down with her customer and new acquaintance to simply chat. The elves make their way to the Archery Contest, which is quite the popular attraction, as the first prize is a beautiful, child-sized cherrywood longbow. Rilyanasse rises to the challenge, taking her 20 shots at the targets at a variety of ranges as the archery targets move back and forth on a conveyor belt. Jynx finds solace in the bottom of a mug of cider, while Massul comes around near the entrance to the fair, dislodging a stuck kite for a stack of 4 halflings. The elderly nanny Cowslip congratulates the dwarf on being a good citizen, and rewards him with a jelly bean, and then another for his rescue of Porter Sportfort. As the afternoon rolls on, the 4 heroes disperse throughout the fair to admire the livestock and observe the children's games. Rilyanasse interviews a dour halfling about his allegedly stolen prize hog, whose disappearance was accompanied by the uncharacteristic appearance of tall folk footprints in his pen. The ranger ventures out to investigate this mystery, but is waylaid on the way by the puppet show, seeing no crowd and the poor puppeteer with an injured hand. Meanwhile, Jynx, Massul, and Túrendil observe a children's game, their keen eyes noticing a mischievous pair of halfling boys whose pockets are loaded unfairly with beanbags, discreetly informing the officiant, who promptly calls the bottom-over boys whose extra beanbags had been filled with rocks. With the 2 expelled, the game plays out to its natural conclusion without incident. The elves join together in investigating the boot prints at Farmer Butterweed's pig pen, finding their way to a camp outside of town where a group of disreputable-looking toughs are having a fine feast of spit-roasted hog, solving the mystery of the hog's disappearance. They return to deliver the dire news to a heartbroken Butterweed. Meanwhile, Jynx and Massul pop into the marquee to get a glimpse of the pudding and play a round of Yondala's luck. The halfling leaps skillfully from table to table and cheers and jeers from the partygoers, netting one of the best times for the day. Massul even gets into the spirit to join in the game, but topples before he gets atop the first table, leaving the tent, dwarf and all, rolling in laughter. His only reward, a playful spoonful of sweet popped into his mouth as he falls. Happy with the events in the marquee, the 2 venture to the stone-skipping contest, where they join in the game, even witnessing an entire kaleidoscope of butterflies burst from the forest to the delight of the crowd. This incredible event distracts the judge, who misses Mimsy Rosblow's skip. A lengthy plea from the dwarf and honeyed words from the halfling see the judge conceding the girl a chance to try to replicate the feat. The party scatters to mill about the festival a bit more, Massul purchasing a commemorative plate for himself, Túrendil providing alms to a misguided youth. while Jynx goes to fill their belly at the big top. Massul joins the halfling shortly thereafter. One of the last events of the day is a comedy show. The jester Poppy Lackwit does her best tight five.
I've not always been a jester. I used to work at a bank, but I lost my job. A woman asked me to check her balance, and I pushed her over. After that, I went to work at a calendar factory, but I got fired because I missed a few days. Then I got a job at a clock factory, but I got fired after putting in a lot of extra hours.
But a heckler in the audience, the same nasty prospector from before, unnerves the halfling and throws off her show. Túrendil calls the bully out on his actions, but the gnome spits at the idea of Longshanks meddling with shortfolk business and makes himself scarce. It's not long after the end of the comedy show before a commotion can be heard from outside the Marquee. Those that rush to see the commotion find the mayor's wife clutching a frog and the rest of the crowd in shock. The nasty gnome from before, one Patcher Moldwarp, got in a verbal altercation with his mayorness, blew a green powder in his face, and before everyone knew what was happening, Mayor Barleydew was a slimy green toad. Angry and concerned, the four hurry after Moldwarp, hoping to catch him. His trail leads them into the dark of the forest, where instead of the vile gnome, they discover Nanny Cowslip, turned entirely to stone. Further investigation reveals the use of overwhelmingly powerful magic. Even more curiously, not only do Moldwarp's tracks suddenly disappear, but Nanny Cowslip's only began not far from her petrified body. With little else turned up for clues, the four return with the petrified woman and bed down for the night. Thus concludes this episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor, but the adventure is far from over. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the next adventure.